Hi, this is Chris Walden. I'm talking to you live from South by Southwest 2012. I found a little bit quieter spot. I'm outside the convention center. It's still pretty gray and nasty, but not quite as rainy as it was yesterday. You're going to hear a little noise going by, but hopefully you can hear me all right. I just got out of a session with Joss Whedon. I wasn't able to get into the room, so there were a lot of us sitting in the hallway. They had a TV set up. We're all sitting down like it's Saturday morning cartoons, getting a chance to see him. Of course, I was all prepared. This says Firefly. This front-facing camera turns everything backwards, so you got to look at me in a mirror. But I wore my Firefly T-shirt. It was very cool to spend some time listening to Joss Whedon. I've been a huge fan of his work since Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even the film, and of course um, the uh, the film series, or the TV series Firefly, the film Serenity, Dollhouse, just all the things that Joss Whedon touches really intrigue me, and I can't wait to see this Avengers movie that's coming out. He's got a horror film coming out as well, Cabin in the Woods, which I almost got to see, but the line was just way too long, and I didn't feel like standing out in the rain for that long. I wanted to talk to you specifically about Joss Whedon because I thought he said a lot of things. You see, I think that development, the programming is an art. It's an intellectual art, but it's an art. There are just aspects to development that require a creative mind. It's not something that you can teach a computer to do well. You can teach a computer to do it in some ways. Once the patterns have been figured out, you can get a computer to repeat those. But that inspiration, that genius that makes an algorithm work, that makes it efficient, that's a human thing, and it is an art form. And I think that any artist can learn from other artists. And so I went to the Joss Whedon session to just hear what he said about everything, but also with that in mind, what would he say that related back to technology? And I thought that there were several things that he said. I don't know if you follow him, but the Avengers film, big blockbuster movie based on Marvel comic book heroes, is about to come out. It's a 90-day shoot. It is massive, expensive project. And at the end of the shooting for that, in the middle of the editing, he makes, on his vacation, he makes a movie. He takes 12 days to shoot a Shakespeare film, Much Ado About Nothing. And if you're familiar with some of Joss's other work, there are people from the Whedonverse, people he's worked with in the past that have kind of come back and have worked with this. But he shot this film, basically put it together in about a week, which is pretty quick in filmmaking terms. Very simple too. He said that it was the kind of thing where you just get a camera and you go. So there wasn't a lot of complicated CGI or set building to do. It was shot at his own home. So, very simple kind of a project. And he said that he was at the final editing stage. He did the first cut of the Avengers. Uh, and in filmmaking, they shoot all the footage and then they take all those bits and bobs and they mash them up to be the first edit of the film. And he said it was a little lengthy, so there's a lot more editing that needs to go. But at that point was when he did this other little film, and he said it was refreshing, that it was a complete change of mindset. He walked away from this one project that he was very involved in, and it gave him a chance to spend some time thinking about something else in a slightly different way. And it re energized him, it recharged his batteries. So when he goes back to do the Avengers, he was much more ready, and he was able to have a little bit of separation from problems he knew he needed to solve and go back into those that much stronger, that much more energized. Now, as you know, I'm the managing editor for Linux and open source. So open source projects are very near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I hear from developers is, well, why would I go spend time on some other project that I'm not getting paid for? Uh, what possible motivation could I have for that? And I think that Joss Whedon spelled it out. Sometimes when we're dealing with that creative process, we have we have a need to recharge our batteries. We're too close to the problem. And we still want to use that creative side. We still want to put those skills to use. So what better way to do that rather than coming up with some whole other program that you're going to write? What if you just stepped into an open source project? You found some little piece of a problem that you could solve that was interesting to you. Spend a little time on that, contribute that, and then use that as an opportunity to recharge your own mental batteries, and then go back to the work project you're trying to do and figure out uh, how that re-energizes you. Something I'd never thought of, because projects need more than just code monkeys. They need more than just people to write the code. Anything that is done in a software company, from documentation, editing, PR, social media, all these things are needed by open source projects as well. So no matter what you do, you have an opportunity to contribute that into an open source project. That's something I'm going to put into practice myself. The other thing he talked about, there was some discussion about his approach to writing. And he said he doesn't like revision. He likes to write and be done. Um, for most of us that try and approach projects, that's a pretty tall order. I don't think I could just sit down and write out something outright. I mean, I do sometimes. I'm sort of forced to, but there's always a lot of tweaking and revision and everything that's required on something like that. Here's how Joss handles that. He says he likes structure. He likes outlining. He likes to have a lot of the outline of what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, all of that spelled out. And then he's just laying in the pieces to make that go. So he puts a lot of focus into that structure up front. And then once he's got the structure, he doesn't write immediately. He doesn't go immediately to keyboard. He sets it up in his head. He plays these scenes out, these characters out in his head. And he does it over and over and over, just plays these scenes, experiments with them in his head until he thinks he's got it right. And at that point, the structure and that imaginative exercise puts him in a position to sit down and write something that is as close as he can get to write, to correct, before it gets into the production process. Very interesting. I think that that applies as well into coding. I think right now there's a lot of uh, there's been some resistance to some of the kind of structure that we have, that we were taught initially, and how development works. The idea of essentially writing flowcharts and all that sort of thing. They're old-fashioned. They don't work anymore. Well, maybe some of that structure does, and in that rush to get to the coding, or in that rush to drag and drop the code from the tools that you're using, maybe we miss some of the steps. We miss some of that opportunity to add some elegance into coding. And I think that's true about all kinds of projects, not just open source ones, but commercial ones as well. There's lots of approaches to structure, lots of approaches to collaborative, both commercial. IBM obviously has the rational tools and things like that. But even in the pure Eclipse or development tools out in the open source world, uh, there are plenty of ways for an individual or for teams to experiment and have that structure. And he said, Bus, he said that when they were doing work on the television programs, he always wanted to have a very solid outline of what was going on, so that not too much was left to the imagination of the writer, within the structure of what was going to happen and why it was going to happen. All of that was very clearly explained in the structure, so it was laid before the person to bring that to life. They understood what was required well enough that they could deliver the correct product generally in the first draft that they turned in. Um, he also talked a little bit about what one of the questions that came up was, um, if you're doing a project, and these guys were talking about a film sort of project, but I think it applies to any kind of project you're doing, that you're trying to get out to an audience. They said, uh, if you're not Joss Whedon, how do you bring that aspect of doing what you want, how you want, and having people like it? Um, and what he said is that you have to have a passion for what you're doing. And to be willing to see it through, and that you do what you know, you do what you feel is right. You follow your own instincts, and you get it out there where people can find it, and then you see how people respond to it. But you have to be willing and able to to look at those responses and to take that into account for what you develop. Because at that point, when your audience is finding what you want, they are responding to the things they like about it, telling you what direction they want it to go in. And if you're paying attention to that, you can grow your project in the direction that's going to make your core audience happy. And we've got all kinds of studies, the Gartner analysis, and that kind of thing as to what people want. But if your audience loves what you do, whether it's music or film or software, those are your people. And if you respond to them and you give them what they like, you give them more of what they like about what you do, they're going to love you for it. And who knows, maybe someday you will be your own Joss Whedon. Well, that's all I've got for today. I'll continue to report. Just couldn't type this one out. Keep following the South by Southwest blog on Developer Works. I'll be typing more there, and I'll try and have some more video for you pretty soon. It's Chris Walden from South by Southwest. We'll see you later.